Senate will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Senators Bridges, Buckner, Coleman, Cook, Coram,
Good morning.
Danielson, Donovan, Fields, Gardner, Janal, Gonzalez, Hanson, Henriksen,
Excused.
Heisey, Holbert, Jaquez Lewis, Kirkmeyer, Kolker, Lee, Liston,
Here.
Lundin, Moreno, Pedersen,
Here.
Priola, Rankin, Rodriguez, Scott,
Here.
Simpson, Smallwood, Sonnenberg, Story, Story,
Here.
Winter, Woodward, Zenzinger. Mr. President,
Here. With the morning roll call is 34 present, 0 absent, 1 excused. We have a quorum. Will the good senator from Douglas County, the taller of the two, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, guests, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the journal, Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the reading of the journal for Thursday. What was the date? Oh, look at this. Where'd you come up with these? For Thursday, April 16th, be dispensed with and to be approved as corrected by the secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
I already know.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and that motion is adopted. Senate Services.
April 18, 2022, correctly printed, Senate Bill 206, correctly engrossed, Senate Bill 160, 175, 180, 185, 193, and 195, correctly re-engrossed, Senate Bill 176, correctly re-revised, House Bill 1295 and 1337, correctly enrolled, Senate Resolution 4.
Committee reports.
April 14, 2022, Committee on Education. After consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 192 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1265 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. Senate Bill 171 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1274 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. Committee on Judiciary. After consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following: House Bill 1217 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. Senate Bill 196 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 179 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation.
Message from the House.
April 14, 2022, Mr. President, the House has voted to grant the House conferees on the First Conference Committee on Senate Bill 34 to consider matters not at issue between the two houses. The Speaker has appointed Representatives Byrd, Chair Snyder, and Sandridge's House conferees on the First Conference Committee on Senate Bill 34. The House has adopted the first report of the First Conference Committee on House Bill 1329 as printed in House Journal April 14, 2022, and has repassed the bill as amended.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege by La Senadora de Denver.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this morning we are joined by our colleagues, and by our constituents and guests from Urban Peak. And we are proud here in the Colorado General Assembly to recognize Urban Peak, a nonprofit dedicated to assisting youth to help them exit homelessness and to transform into self-determined, fulfilled young people and to lead fulfilling lives. For over 30 years, Urban Peak has provided youth experiencing homelessness with the physical, mental, and behavioral health care, education, and employment opportunities, and round-the-clock, 24/7 crisis support. Annually, Urban Peak serves more than 1,000 young people in our state and will provide Colorado communities with over $20 million in long-term community savings. So with that, the Colorado General Assembly thanks Urban Peak for its commitment to improving local communities and providing ample support systems to the vulnerable youth in our state. Colorado youth experiencing homelessness can reach their full potential because of their work. Joining us today, colleagues, from Urban Peak, we have Melissa Glather, the Assistant Director of Development. We have Clayton Gonzalez, the Director of Strategic Initiatives, and AJ Sheikh, a board member from Urban Peak. Colleagues, please join me in welcoming our guests.
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Or an announcement, I guess. Never mind. You will be getting these in your mailboxes, handing out, but this week, April 18th through the 22nd, we will be doing an Urban Peak Capital Donation Drive where we will be asking people to donate adult-sized clothing, adult-sized accessories and shoes, unopened toiletries, and unopened cleaning supplies. And you can bring all donations to room 248 in the Capitol over by the Majority Leader's Corner up until Friday, April 22nd at 4 p.m. So we hope you guys have had everything laying around, that you'll bring in some stuff to donate to this worthy cause. Thank you.
Third reading of bills. Final passage. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 185?
Senate Bill 185, Senators Danielson and Buckner, Representatives Lindsay and Young, concerning addressing the needs of older Coloradans through the Strategic Investments in Aging Grant Program.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 185 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of Senate Bill 185. Are there any no votes? Senators Lundin, Minority Leader Holbert, Cook, Gardner, Simpson, Heisey, Sonnenberg, Kirkmeyer, Woodward, Rankin, Smallwood, Scott, Liston, Quorum. With 20 ayes, 14 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 185 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Janal, Fields, Story, Pedersen, Senator Fields, I got you, Lee, Kolker, Coleman, Jaquez Lewis, Hansen, Zenzinger, Winter. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to lay over Senate Bill 160 to Wednesday, April 20th.
The motion is to lay over Senate Bill 160 until Wednesday, April 20th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 160 will be laid over. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 175?
Senate Bill 175, Senators Hansen and Fields, Representative Ortiz and Roberts, concerning the use of mobile electronic devices when driving a motor vehicle and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 175 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of Senate Bill 175. Are there any no votes? Senators Lundin, Jaquez Lewis, Gardner, Sonnenberg, Kirkmeyer. Yeah, that was you. Cook, Woodward, Smallwood, Zenzinger, Rodriguez, Liston. Senator Gardner will be recorded as an aye vote. With 24 ayes, 10 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 175 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Kolker, Minority Leader Holbert, Priola, Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 180 layover until Wednesday, April 20th.
The motion is to lay over Senate Bill 180 until April 20th. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 180 will be laid over. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 193?
Senate Bill 193, Senators Fenberg and Gonzalez, Representatives Valdez A. and Prolick, concerning measures to improve air quality in the state and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 193 on third reading and final passage and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of Senate Bill 193. Are there any no votes? Senators Lundin, Gardner, Minority Leader Holbert, Simpson, Heisey, Sonnenberg, Kirkmeyer, Woodward, Rankin, Smallwood, Scott, Liston, Quorum. With a vote of 21 ayes, 13 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 193 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Winter, Lee, Buckner, Jaquez Lewis, Janal, Kolker, Danielson, Hansen, Pedersen, Zenzinger, Story, Fields, Donovan, will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 194?
Senate Bill 194, Senators Story and Fields, Representatives Valdez A. and Hooten, concerning allowing unencumbered money in the Creative Industries Cash Fund that is credited to the fund from the Capital Construction Fund for the purpose of the Art and Public Places program to be available for expenditures for 3 fiscal years.
Senator Story.
I move Senate Bill 194 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of Senate Bill 194. Are there any no votes? Senators Lundin, Cook, Smallwood, Kirkmeyer, Liston. With 29 ayes, 5 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 194 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Winter, Lee, Gonzalez, Buckner, Janal, Donovan, Hanson, Bridges, Jaquez Lewis, Pedersen. General orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar, Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into Committee of the Whole for consideration of general order, second reading of bills, consent calendar.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The motion is adopted and the Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of the general order, second reading of bills, consent calendar, and Senator Lee will take the chair.
The committee will come to order and the court rule is relaxed. Will the clerk please read the title of the bill on the general order, second reading of bills, consent calendar?
House Bill 1307, Representatives Valdez D. and Pico, Senator Moreno, concerning technical changes to the Practice Acts regulating mental health providers.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move for the passage of the one bill on the general order, second reading of bills, consent calendar, which includes House Bill 1307. There are no committee reports.
Is there any discussion on the bill on the consent calendar? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the bill on the general order, second reading of bills, consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. No. The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion for is for the committee to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has had a bill under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your Committee of the Whole begs leave to report it has had under consideration the following bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1307, passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the report.
The motion is the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, the Committee of the Whole report is adopted. House Bill 1307 passed on second reading and order revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. General order, second reading of bills. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of general order, second reading of bills.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of the general order, second reading of bills, and Senator Lee will take the chair.
The committee will come to order and the court rule is relaxed. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1253?
House Bill 1253, Representative Ortiz, Senator Danielson, concerning the provision of adaptive equipment in rental motor vehicle.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1253 and the committee report.
To the Transportation and Energy Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We made a slight amendment to accommodate smaller businesses, and I urge the adoption of the report.
The motion before us is the adoption of the committee report. All in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I urge the adoption of House Bill 1253.
Is there any discussion on the, Senator Gardner? The bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate the good senator from Wheat Ridge, her commitment to serving people with disabilities. As I looked at this bill and I looked at the subject and how it's implemented, though, I wondered whether the Americans with Disabilities Act already deals with this issue and deals with this issue in an effective manner, and why it is that we need to add a state statute to the overall regulatory regime. Since I have the undivided attention of the sponsor of the bill, I'm sure I'll be getting some answer to that.
Is there any, Senator Gardner?
Thank you. Since I don't seem to be getting an answer to that, I will just make the raise the concern that I have, which is that the Americans with Disabilities Act already deals with this. In fact, it delves so deeply into these issues that if you have a website for your business, you better meet accessibility requirements for that. So I'm just wondering, is this more protective? Does it add another layer? Are there additional requirements over and above those for the Americans with Disabilities Act?
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Well, for those who didn't have the privilege of being in our committee hearing, they might not have heard from the consumers with disabilities who described the problems that they face when they go to rent cars. Yes, the ADA requires that car rental companies provide people with disabilities access to accessible vehicles. But just like with a lot of things, that doesn't happen until the state mandates it in a different way. So because people in the disability community came to us and said, here's our experience, here's what happens when I go to rent a car, even though it is federally mandated, here's how the system fails us because we have a disability. They described showing up to get their rental car that had been guaranteed and paid for, only be told that it's not available, period. So then they're forced to find some other mode of transportation after waiting for hours, if not days on end, for that reservation to be filled. People with disabilities are stranded at the rental car company because their reservations are not filled. Then they need to pay for an alternative mode of transportation from the rental car company because they have a disability and the car that they needed and were guaranteed is not available to them. When they have to take an alternative mode of transportation, they then have to pay for that. So they've already paid to rent the car, it was denied to them, they're stranded, they have no way of getting out except to take an Uber. Sometimes they show up and they have to sit there and wait for hours and hours and hours while someone comes in to fit the car with the hand tools necessary to drive the vehicle away. So they watch able-bodied people after able-bodied people come through, get the reservations that they made while they're sitting there waiting there, only because they have a disability. There's lots of reasons that we need to do this bill, but Dr. Kane, who is also an amputee and serves amputees, I think he said it the best in committee. He said, when people come to visit our beautiful state, when people come to Colorado, the biggest challenge that people with disabilities should have is not renting a car, it should be conquering the beautiful mountains in our state. There you go. Why do we have these barriers for people with disabilities to have independence, to be able to travel around our gorgeous state and enjoy it just the same as someone who does not need adaptive equipment? There is no reason. It's a federal mandate. It's not happening now. We have a solution to bridge the gap. We're giving these companies 3, if not 4 years to phase this in. And it's a very, very reasonable approach. So yes, if you have a disability, you should not be sent into a different place to make your reservation. You should be able to make it online just like everyone else. You shouldn't have to sit for hours on some phone line to nowhere where your reservation might never be confirmed because you have a disability. No, you should be able to reserve a car just like everyone else. That is why we have to pass this bill. That is why the disability community is behind it. And again, we've accommodated time after time after time through the House and even into the Senate process the requests of the rental car companies in order to accommodate them in a way that makes it more likely that their businesses will implement this important step. So what we have here is a requirement that within 3 years for most companies from now, so not tomorrow, not next year, not the next year after that, but 3 years, they must implement this bill and make sure that people with disabilities are able to reserve a car in an online portal or a telephone line just like any other consumer can. They must make sure that those cars are available within 8 hours if they're at the Denver International Airport, within 48 hours if you're in the metro area, and within 72 hours if you're outstate. So we're giving them plenty of time, up to 3 days, to make sure that the car is available and ready for the consumer when they need it. The 3-year time period for them to phase in is way more time than they would ever need to change their website to accommodate the new law. In fact, I've had my friends and neighbors who do have disabilities have tried to rent cars in between November, when we started this process, and the introduction of the bill. And anecdotally, they've told me that Hertz Car Rental Company has already changed their website to make this kind of reservation available. So they could do it in a matter of weeks. We're giving everyone 3 years. And for small companies with 50 vehicles or fewer, we're giving them 4 years to figure this out, acknowledging that it does take some planning and some time. But we're not talking about overly burdensome, expensive accommodations. Hand controls for vehicles cost approximately $1,000. So for these huge corporate companies to claim that this is some kind of a burden to implement at the local level is, in the view of the disability community and my own, fairly inaccurate. That is not a heavy burden, cost-wise or time-wise, to implement, keeping in mind that we have given them 3 years to make these changes. So I applaud the companies who are already working to accommodate people with disabilities, encourage them to come to our state, enjoy the beauty that we have to offer, enjoy the recreational activities that we have to offer as a very unique state, and not differentiate between those tourists who have disabilities and those who don't. We heard from consumers in committee that said, if I knew every time that I was going to be able to rent a car dependably, I would travel more frequently and I would rent that car every time. So in the view of the disability community, this can only support those businesses who work hard to try to accommodate this population. They are willing and able to put their money into these businesses who do it right, who do right by people with disabilities, and make the cars available. They're coming to us and saying, I am far more likely to travel, I am far more likely to spend money in your state, I am far more likely to give these car companies my money if I knew that there was a dependable reservation at the other end of that line, which is not the case now. It is not the reality of a person with a disability who wants to rent a car. They do not feel that it is a guarantee, which it should be, far long overdue. So it's a really simple measure. Let's make sure that people with disabilities are able to enjoy the same independence that people who don't have disabilities are able to enjoy when they go and rent a car, to tour our state, to enjoy this beauty the way that they want to, do whatever they want to do. And that's what this bill achieves.
Senator Lundin, Senator Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the bill sponsor as well. We begin this conversation in violent agreement. We actually want to achieve the same thing. We want people with disabilities to be able to get access to a rented car. The challenge is we can't change the realities of logistics. We can't change the realities of how people and computers and life intersect and interact. Now, in fact, this just happened to me yesterday. I realized as I'm preparing to take a trip this coming weekend to see a nephew get married back in Virginia that I needed to rent a car, and I hadn't rented the car, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's too late. But no, we can, by the miracle of the internet, reserve a car up until the last possible second. Now, I'm several days out, and I was glad to see that there was still inventory available, and so I was able to, online, late last night, reserve a car that I will pick up Friday morning. But the challenge with this bill is, and incidentally, the sponsor described the fact that this rolls out over 3 years. The reality is, in 90 days, it will be illegal to not do what this bill says do. Now, you don't get a fine applied against your account for 3 years. Those roll on over time. But within 90 days, who wants to be a lawbreaker? Who wants to be in violation of the law 91 days from today, or 91 days from the day that this is signed into law? Nobody. The reality is it happens very promptly, very swiftly, very quickly. It's not a 3-year rollout. The fines are a 3-year rollout, but not the reality of the application. So here's what happens. Traveling tomorrow, business hours have closed, things are shut down. I get online because the internet's open 24/7, 365, and I reserve a car, let's say at 2 in the morning. Now, if I'm renting a car to pick up in Grand Junction or Sterling or one of our more remote communities here in Colorado, and I rent it in the middle of the night before I am going to arrive, which this law would require that there be inventory available, nobody knows until a person, not an internet, not a computer, not an algorithm, but a person wakes up and goes to see whether there is a car of that nature available in inventory for the person with disabilities to drive. So let's say I reserve the car at 2 a.m. At 4 a.m. that next morning, before a human being has even woken up, the car company's in violation of the law because it's a remote community that doesn't have a massive inventory of cars. And they may not have the cars that match the needs of that disabled person. Now, if we do it a week in advance, a month in advance, some time in advance, there's plenty of time for a human being to make sure that we will have the car to not let down our customer. And at the end of the day, that's, in my opinion, the most powerful thing in all of our lives. It's the authority of a willing buyer and a willing seller to say, let's get together. I've got value for you. You've got value for me. I need a car. It has to have specific special provisions for my abilities. I'm able differently than others. And you, car rental company, you want my money. And I'm willing to give it to you. And so there's a willing buyer and a willing seller. And if you do it far enough in advance, it all works out fine. But to push a car company, specifically in one of our rural communities, into a box where they're in violation of the law in the middle of the night, before an employee even can wake up and see whether or not in their limited inventory they've got something that is available or could easily be modified to be available, it's just wrong. And that's where we depart. As I said, we start out in violent agreement. We want this to happen. We want people to be served. We want all people to be served. Because the rich tapestry of people who are able differently one from another across our state and across our country is what makes America great. And giving them the ability to come and go as they would choose is important. But we've got to do it in a way that doesn't require a suspension of the laws of logistics. We can't do that any more effectively than we could suspend the laws of gravity. The reality is, this is well intended, but not applicable based on the realities specifically of some of the rental car providers in some of our smaller communities. I thank you, Mr. Chair, and I am eager to hear any responses the bill sponsor may have in response to my challenges here. Thank you.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just reiterate what I said on the front end, that in those smaller remote communities, we've already amended the bill at the request of the industry to give them 3 entire days. So we already did that.
Senator Heisey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So since this is the year to meet my extended family, I just want you to know I am not insensitive about what this bill is trying to do, because my little brother spent the last 30 years of his life in a wheelchair. He had adaptive equipment on his Chevy truck so he could drive. I know how important mobility, independence, and including in his case, the ability to make a living, transportation is. When I think of renting a car, typically I'm at the airport. I'm renting a car for whatever purpose. I have to admit I don't travel much with business. However, there are many, many people that I'm in line with at the airport that they're there on business. They need that automobile to make a living. I understand that if you need a car with adaptive equipment and you're there on business, it is a double whammy. You need to know that it's going to be there for you and it's going to be available when they said it would be available or when you needed it. When we heard this in committee, and by the way, I did vote for it in committee, kind of hoping to have had an amendment in hand, that the sponsor would have had an amendment in hand to deal with some of the concerns we heard in committee. But we heard several things in committee, one being not everything happens at the airport. There are not always rows and rows of cars that you can choose from and personnel on hand. And even some of the larger airports, their rental shut down at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and I have been caught there before where that did not work well for me. I put myself in my brother's place. If that had happened to him, it would have been so much more complicated for him. So I truly do have empathy. But we have neighborhood car rentals. Think about them. I could advertise for one of them here today. It's a name you would all recognize. The airport is not their key business. They have neighborhood car rentals throughout the city. All of the cities, not just the urban areas. But if you want to rent a car in Alamosa, you're probably going to rent from this company because they have a place in Alamosa where you can rent a car. They don't have rows and rows of cars. They have 4 or 5, 10, 12 maybe, depending on how busy it may be. And a friend of mine, his retirement job, he was tired of the stress. He said, I want something where I don't have to deal with people, don't have to do much thinking. He went to work for this company and he shuttles cars around everywhere. I'm always surprised when he tells me where they move cars to and from when I ask him, where he's been recently. So they try to get cars where they need to be when they need them, but it's not the airport scenario that we're thinking about where there are rows after row after row of automobiles available for rent. So the logistics are more difficult than you might think. And what I am concerned about on this bill is we're going to pass a bill that cannot be complied with. And that doesn't do anybody any good for us to pass a bad bill, a bill that just does not work. There is certainly a way to get there. I guess I would ask the sponsor if perhaps we could lay this over and spend a little more time with some of the companies to try to deal with some of the issues you've heard about here already. The fact that the bill really does take effect in 90 days. And we spent a fair bit of time on this confirming your reservations. Because it takes more than just confirming, will we have an automobile at this location when you get there, which is pretty easily done with computer services. Now, all of a sudden, Will we have an automobile that can be outfitted with the adaptive services? Will we have someone in that neighborhood, because these neighborhood shops, they have to bring someone in to either adapt the automobile or to bring the automobile in. It's bolt-on equipment. It's not rocket science. It doesn't have to come from the factory that way. But it just becomes so much more complicated that there's really no way that in this 2-hour time frame, they will always be able to guarantee and meet that deadline of telling the customer, the person that needs the adaptive services, that yes, absolutely we will, or no, we won't. And they, of course, are going to do the very best that they can to make this happen. If you're handicapped, if you need adaptive services, your money spends just like everybody else's. They're in business to help you, to make give you a service, to take your money and make a profit. They understand all of that, but some things are just more labor intensive, including just the process of guaranteeing your reservation. So I would ask for that we would lay this bill over for a few days to try to work out some of those details.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for being in such strong agreement on most things. Did you say violent? Violent agreement. I don't think I want to say that, but that's okay. I appreciate it. And I appreciate my colleague for listening in committee, because he brought some good questions forward. I think what I would remind my colleagues, though, is that we have been working with the companies since November. And so it's request after request after request. We have figured out a way to work with the disability community to accommodate their concerns in a way that didn't compromise the bill, its integrity, or what we're trying to achieve for people with disabilities. There may be a last few lingering concerns with the bill, but so far the proposed solutions are not okay with the disability community, which I think there's a point where you have to decide, yes, we want to work with these companies. We want to make sure that they're implementing the bill and accommodating the public. But we don't want to do it in a way that either creates loopholes for companies to deny these reservations, or further constrict the rights that we're trying to achieve for people with disabilities, which, by the way, should already just be the case, right? So it's not that we weren't listening or open to further changes, it's that we've hit a point where those changes that the companies have requested are not acceptable to the disability community. And we have done a lot to compromise significantly throughout this process because they brought really legitimate concerns to us on implementation. So I think that's kind of where we're at. And if what I'm hoping is, yes, if it requires additional planning and management of time for these companies to arrange for someone who's qualified to put the adaptive equipment on, they should do that. Maybe it's not the most convenient thing in the world. It should be happening now. It already should be happening. So the bill now requires it. You've got to do it. You've got to figure it out. And you're right, it goes into effect this year, but again, they're not on the hook for the fines and the enforcement of the thing for 3 years. And if you are a smaller company, 4 years. So I would say to those companies, you may still have concerns. And what I have told them in the meantime, between committee and now, work on it. Start to work on it. Get your website fixed. Make it happen and identify those tweaks, if there are any, that are truly burdensome to your providing rental cars to people with disabilities, and we can address them in a future session. But what they have come back with right now, it's just not acceptable because it just goes a bit too far and kind of negates the purpose of the bill. So there's still a willingness to work with the companies, but what I would say is today, it's a great start. Get started. If you haven't already, it's time, and we want to see this through together. You've got several years before you're facing any penalty if you aren't accommodating people in the way that the bill requires. And the purpose for that was so that people try to get into using it, get into accommodating people with disabilities. Get it done. And then if we need to come back and address the questions that still exist in a few months from now, the sponsors and the community are open to that. So again, thanks to my colleagues and for your consideration, and that's where we're at. We hope that you take a step today and help folks with disabilities enjoy the same kind of independence as everybody else.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So just to clean a couple things up and working on things over time, improving policy, that's inevitable because there are always unintended consequences, some of them positive, most of them negative in what we do here that, whoops, didn't expect that, but it happens. So to be clear, if you're a car company with more than 50 cars, big national company you are so described, you don't get the 3 days. You got 2 hours. Now, if you're a big national car company who happens to have a business model that says, you know what, we're going to meet people where they live, we're going to distribute small patches of cars out, little bits of inventory out into the communities. We're not going to keep all of our cars resident at an airport. You know, this big national car company, I don't know whether COVID changed this or not, used to come pick you up and get you to your car. But they have small batches of inventory distributed across communities. And they are not exempted, as previously described from this well just now, to have 3 days to make an adaptive change to the car. You got 2 hours, 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., or fall out of compliance with the law. It's a logistics problem. It's not that you're not intending to do it. I mean, these folks show up wanting to serve their communities already. They got a business model that says, we will come live with you. We will be in your neighborhood. We will do that which anything we can do to meet your needs as our customers. This bill has a challenge in that it defies logistics. That's the challenge, that's the problem. Now, mom and pops, they get 3 days if they have 49 cars or fewer, but anybody who has more than 50 cars doesn't get that exemption. So I'm just simply saying, a little more time to get 1253 squared up if we can do it, or not. We ram it through, push it on through and say it's from the government. It's here to help you, whether it does or doesn't. I'd say let's take some time and let's get 1253 right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And there was conversation about this bill, House Bill 1253, about logistics. I know a little bit about logistics because my son worked at Enterprise, rental car. He had an internship there. And it was every summer, that was his summer job. He would help people with securing their car, providing them some instruction. And when you talk about logistics, that's one thing that car rentals are known for. It's a part of their culture. It's a part of the way they do business. And when you think about someone who is disabled or that has some issues as it relates to mobility and they're challenged, that's something that also I can speak about. Because my mobility is challenged. I haven't had to rent a car, but those who need to rent a car, who have a disability, I don't like the sense that they're going to be denied because of logistics. When you're disabled, you're dealing with logistics as how to navigate coming into this building. Maybe you might want to go to the grocery store. They might have those little scooters for you to move around. The time is now for us to address how other people can have the same flexibility and freedoms that we all enjoy. It's a privilege when you have to be able to walk and not think about how to rent a car, or maybe get into a school or get into a courtroom. And so we need to give these companies and then also the person with that disability, that we understand the challenges that you face when you're trying to rent a car. And we don't want to get in your way of you being able to have access to the freedoms and the privileges that we all have. I mean, really, we wouldn't have handicap parking spots if someone didn't say, well, you know, that's what we should do, but there was probably somebody saying, well, no. They don't need to have special parking. We don't need to have ramps coming into buildings. These are now common codes that are in practice right now. And so now we need to take it to the next level, a higher level, something that I never really even thought about. And that's renting a car. And if you know, you probably experienced this. I've rented cars and they were sold out just for an able-bodied person. It's hard to rent a car, even when you don't have a disability, because the inventory is just not there. You can't even almost buy a car, even a used car. So the access to buying cars is difficult on so many different levels for so many different reasons. So I think this is a common sense approach to accepting the law as it relates to 1990 under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it goes on to talk about making reasonable accommodations to avoid discrimination. And so if there is modifications that need to be made in practices and procedures necessary for the goodwill of that person living with a disability, then the law says we must. So when we talk about logistics, that this is too inconvenient for the mom and pop shop, it's just hard for me to understand that, because maybe they don't have the car available and they can go rent somewhere else. But when you are a person with disability, this just grants that person more flexibility to be able to navigate the roads like we all enjoy. So members, I ask that you vote yes on this House Bill 1253 for the people who have limited mobility. And this gives them that opportunity if they want a car. We don't even know what the numbers are. But let's start somewhere, and let's start today. Vote yes on House Bill 1253.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much. And this is the interesting place where we start in vigorous agreement and then we wander off into a place where it just can't be done. The reality is we've heard a little bit just now from the good senator from Aurora about privileges, and then those privileges somehow become rights. Because I have the privilege of driving in America, I now have a right to have a car available for me when I show up at the airport. That's it. That just doesn't happen that way. And here's the challenge with what's going on. Because they realized it was not logistically possible for a ma and pa shop, somebody that has less than 50 cars, 49 cars or fewer, to actually comply with the law, they've got relief. They've got a carve out. The ma and pa shop, small shop in a neighborhood or in the community, doesn't have to comply because it just can't be done. The reality is, if you're a big national company, but your business model distributes limited parcels, limited groups of inventory around to different places, you may find yourself in the exact same logistical problem, not having a car that can be adapted within the time frame required now by law in order to comply with that law. So the law as written, it opts one group out because it just can't be done. But then you've got a whole nother group where they're under the same circumstances. It just can't be done, but now they're in violation of the law because we have said, well, you're a big national company, figure out how to do it. Facts are stubborn things. Realities like gravity. And you can't magically make a car be in a different place than it was 2 hours ago just because you want it there. You have to be able to manage the circumstances of inventory, especially when it's small groups of inventory distributed around a community, around a state. I would once again recall the request for more time to try and sort out this logistical challenge with 1253 and actually make it law that can be complied with. And therefore, I would argue is a more righteous law than a law that just physically can't be complied with. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1253? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1253. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. The bill is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 174?
Senate Bill 174, Senator Buckner, Representative Kennedy concerning the criteria to be considered in a sunset review hearing.
Senator Buckner.
Mr. Chair, I move Senate Bill 174.
To the bill.
Thank you. This bill is aimed at cleaning up the statutory criteria for sunset reviews conducted by the Colorado Office of Policy, Research, and Regulatory Reform, which is better known as DORA. This bill is primarily non-substantive and focused on increasing transparency. Also, Senate Bill 174 modernizes the language around equity, diversity, and inclusion in the sunset review process. Current statute only directs the consideration of affirmative action within the review process, and as you know, this is antiquated language that really doesn't apply to many circumstances. By exchanging this language for EDI language, we are giving DORA the tools they need to make recommendations, when applicable, regarding how a program or function under sunset review might improve on equity, diversity, and inclusion. This bill also adds a criterion, when applicable, for existence of a board or commission to be included in a sunset. This will simply allow DORA to consider whether an existing regulatory board is necessary. Just remember that this is not an automatic outcome, but one that allows them to consider if the director model option would be more effective than a board in certain circumstances. I am asking for an aye vote on this important bill for DORA.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 174? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 174. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Senate Bill 174 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1297?
House Bill 1297, Representatives Kipp and Neville, Senators Bridges and Scott, concerning the designation of daylight saving time as a standard year-round time within the state when allowed by federal law.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of Locking the Clock, I move House Bill 1297 and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I heard this bill in committee, I've lost track of time, several weeks ago, and actually voted against it. But I also had heard prior to that Senate Bill 22-135, which was a bill that would set permanently Colorado on standard time. So we have a bill to, and that was actually a referendum to the voters, which I thought was probably a better approach to this discussion. Folks that have been here, I don't know how many times you all have heard this. I've heard it referred to many times as brophy time, as a matter of fact. So look, I just felt compelled to come up and talk a little bit about really this probably, from my perspective, ought to be something up to the voters to decide. And the good senator from Arapahoe County, yes. Thank you. And I had a good discussion about, you know, the challenges of trying to refer this current bill to the voter creates some complexities because it's really tied to the federal government taking action, along with a number of other states taking action as well. So it's a little complicated, but I do feel really moved that this ought to be something that the voters decide and not the General Assembly. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair and sponsor. Appreciate it.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if I'm rising in support or opposition to this bill. I'm just kind of rising. So, because what time am I rising? Yeah, I just want to add a little bit of a thought problem or for the body to consider, because yes, we talk about daylight and standard, and I'm sure many of you have gotten impassioned emails arguing for one side or another, citing one side or one set of data or another. This is definitely one of those things that I think you can find the argument you need and the citation you need to be on either side of this. The thought problem that I do want to introduce is that there is a challenge here of who is benefiting from the time that you pick. And in this circumstance, we are going to say that mornings are going to be darker and evenings are going to be brighter. And so I just want to ask that we think about who is, if this goes forward, and of course I think that this could be changed going forward or whatever. I don't think this conversation is concluded today. But for folks who have to work in the morning, outdoors, to start off their day, we are making that harder. And we are making school bus rides darker, and we are making people who get to work earlier darker. And I think I'm going to make a big generalization here, but right, those are normally the folks that have to work earlier in the day or have night shifts or have longer school bus rides tend to either be, that tends to be rural work, and I would say moderate and lower income, right? We just know what those jobs and those lifestyles look like. And the folks that argue for longer restaurant hours and businesses working in the evening, right, that's a different culture and a different group of folks. So I think we are putting the burden of convenience on the people who don't always have voices in this type of discussion, because it's a discussion of, I don't mean this to be a pun, but it's a debate that those of us who have time to debate, right? And so I just want to add that conversation here of, think about the people that have to exist in early morning, and those are going to be the folks that feel the impact of darkness. The people that want longer hours later, think about that demography, and then I think choose who you're voting for and who you're voting against.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in strong support of House Bill 1297. I also added my name as a co-sponsor to the Senate legislation that would have, or still seeks to refer the question of standard time to the voters. I don't know that both bills need to pass, but I think the worst solution is to stay with what we have. I have two sons. They're grown now, in their 20s, but I can remember explaining to them that they didn't actually lose an hour, and that later in the year they wouldn't actually gain an hour. No, the change in what the clock says is because we human beings designed a system that says we'll change the time that our clocks say twice a year. But they didn't actually lose an hour or gain an hour. We just changed our clocks. I also remember explaining to them that despite folklore, it wasn't because their grandparents or great-grandparents, farmers in Nebraska and Kansas, it wasn't because of the farmers. The farmers didn't decide to do this. It was mostly golf and other sports. Now in Colorado, we have a very important sport called skiing. And I know the ski industry doesn't like probably either change. They like the way we are. And I understand, and I think my friend from Vail probably identified that, having more light in the early morning hours, whatever the clock says, is probably more important. But maybe a personal testimony, a focus group of one. When I was a kid, I lived in a place called Alaska. And the further north you go in Alaska, like Anchorage, I remember getting up and going to grade school on the school bus, and it was dark. In the afternoon, it would start to get sort of light a little bit. I can remember Mount McKinley glowing in pink while I'm riding the school bus, and it was just barely light. And then in the summer, around the solstice in late June, it never gets dark. And people accommodate, they adjust. You have to remind yourself, if you live or vacation in Alaska in the summertime, to go to sleep because it's light outside. And in the winter, it hardly ever gets light. The sun just basically tracks around the horizon. But our friends to the south, southwest, Arizona, they don't change their clocks 2 times a year, and we can too. I also call your attention, I'm sure, colleagues, if you've been in the General Assembly for a few years, I'm sure that you've received emails like I have asking, please, can we change it one way or the other? Let's not do this unnecessary clock changing twice a year. And a lot of people, I think generally people who contact legislators about moving away from changing the clocks twice a year, it's easy for people to assume that it's never been tried, but it has. My friend, I think from Alamosa, referred to Brophy time. Shout out to former Senator Greg Brophy. He ran legislation like this when he was in the General Assembly, tried to collect signatures to put it on the ballot, and yet people keep asking, why won't you change this? Well, I want to credit my friend from Greenwood Village, Arapahoe County. Cherry Creek Village, yep. Cherry Hills, no, Greenwood Village. Yes, yes. And my friend from Mesa County, thank you for taking on the criticism, because we've probably also all seen the emails that are hypercritical of the bill to refer the question of staying on standard time and criticism of this bill. So I guess the people who criticize one way or the other, I guess their preference is to stay with what we've got, and that's my last option. That's my least favorite. Why continue? I call it climb up on the ladder day. Twice a year, we have a big wall clock in our house, and I have to climb up on a ladder, change the batteries, change the time. Oh, and then also you're supposed to change the 9 volts in your smoke detectors. Hope everybody does that once or twice a year. Climb up on a ladder, hopefully not fall off a ladder. I'm sure people go to the emergency room with falling accidents more on the 2 days that we change our clocks. Why? Because human beings decided that that would be a better way for human beings to exist. It's not nature. It's not ordained by God. We figured out a better way to do it, and I'm here to say it isn't. It's silly. If the clocks don't change and it means maybe you get up earlier at one part of the year and get up later, you can do that. But daylight changes back and forth as we go around the sun one more time. We move through winter and summer. Daylight changes every day, the amount of daylight, except 2, when we artificially push it forward or backward by changing the numbers, the reading on the clock. And that's just all made up by us. whether we pass the Senate bill or the House Bill 1297 or both, I will be an enthusiastic aye vote. I don't really have a strong preference for whether it's standard time or daylight time, but let's not stick with what we've got. And I agree with my friend from Alamosa. I wish there was a way we could refer 1297 to the voters, because I know that there are a lot of people in Colorado who would like to vote on this question. But this one would leave it up to the federal government. Kind of disappointed about that, but I will be an enthusiastic aye vote on 1297. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Thank you, colleagues, for listening to the discussion on 1297. It's interesting that this has become a decades-old discussion in these hollowed walls of the chambers, but here we are. And it's also interesting that over the last decade, the discussions and the arguments have shifted both directions from one to the other. But I think the only thing I would add today is that the majority of people that have reached out to me have basically been saying, let's please just lock the clock. One way or the other, just lock the clock so that we can finally just have some sanity to our normal year-round adventures, whatever those might be. So thanks for your consideration, and I certainly hope you support this bill, and let's move on to bigger and better things. Thank you very much.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want the madness to end. That's all I want. I want to lock the clocks, not change them twice a year. Time is time. Why are we messing with it? It should just be the time. The data on standard versus daylight time, maybe it is marginally better for sleep to be on standard time. Maybe it's marginally better for happiness to be on daylight time. The U.S. Department of Transportation did a study on all the existing research out there and found that the differences are in the percentage points at the most. That maybe in the morning, kids in the dark is bad, but at night, if they're playing in the dark, that's even worse. The data is mixed on standard versus daylight. The data is clear that changing your clocks in the spring leads to more heart attacks, leads to more car accidents, leads to decreased productivity. That's the only evidence that's really clear on this. So I ask for an aye vote on this bill to just stop the madness, lock the clock, and move this state, when Congress allows and 4 other states in this time zone agree, to move us to year-round daylight time. Ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1297? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1297. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. The ayes clearly have it. 1297 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The question before us is to rise and report. Is there any discussion, any opposition? The committee will rise and report.
Senate will come to order. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report it has had under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 174, passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1253 is amended. House Bill 1297, passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
Motion is the adoption of the committee of whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, the committee of the whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 174 passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1253 is amended. House Bill 1297 passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Consideration of conference committee reports. Will the clerk please read the title of House Bill 1340?
House Bill 1340, Representatives Harrod and McCluskey, Senators Hansen and Zenzinger, concerning capital-related transfers of money.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adopt the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1340.
That's right.
Any explanation of what this committee did? Senator Hansen.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Members, just a brief explanation of what happened in the conference committee. We focused in on making sure that we did not have any of our higher ed institutions fall out of the category they are currently in, which is enterprise status. And so we made some changes to how the transfers were effectuated to make sure that we didn't impinge on enterprise status. And appreciate your permission to take care of that in conference committee, and we now bring it back to you for adoption.
The Senate will stand in senatorial 5. Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. We appreciated that moment of clarification. Just to be sure that everybody is on the same page, this is just a refinance. It did not change the amount of transfer, and so we please ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is for the adoption of the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1340. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, House Bill 1340, the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1340 is adopted. Senator Hansen or Zenzinger, you have more business to do. Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was so excited about the previous gavel that I forgot we need one more. We asked for the move for the repassage of House Bill 1340.
The motion is for the repassage of House Bill 1340 as amended. Are there any no votes? Senators Lundin. With a vote of 33 ayes, 1 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, House Bill 1340 is repassed. Co-sponsors. Message from the governor.
Friday, April 15, 2022, Colorado Senate. Honorable members of the Colorado Senate, pursuant to the authority vested in the office of the Governor of the State of Colorado, have the honor to inform you that I have approved and filed with the Secretary of State the following acts. Senate Bill 142, Repeal Municipal Bond Supervision Advisory Board, approved on Friday, April 15, 2022 at 12:05 p.m. Senate Bill 143, Update Common Provision Term Regulator, Title 12, approved on Friday, April 15, 2022 at 12:05 p.m. Sincerely, Jared Polis, Governor.
Signing of bills.
April 14, 2022, the President has signed House Bill 1330.
Took me all weekend. Delivery to the governor.
April 14, 2022, to the governor for signature on Thursday, April 14, 2022 at 3:30 p.m. Senate Bill 32, 103, 142, and 143.
Announcements. Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Business, Labor, and Technology will be meeting at 1:30 today. We will be rearranging the order. House Bill 1261 will be first on the calendar, and then second will be 1031. Thank you.
Minority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, you may have heard and you may have known him, but Evan Goulding passed away Friday. Evan was a mentor to me. I've shared with you before that now 20 years and 2 months ago, I was standing right out there with Evan. He was the contract lobbyist for the association that I managed. And he looked at me and said, if you're going to work down here, I had to get registered. He said, if you're going to work down here, 2 things. First, you have to tell the truth and be accountable. And second, never get involved in leadership elections. I kept the first one. Evan was struggling with cancer, but heard from Ann Terry at Special Districts Association that Evan did pass away Friday. Hope to organize a memorial for him or a tribute, whatever is appropriate for a non-member. Evan served as the Commissioner of Ag years ago before he went to work for the Special Districts Association, and SDA allowed him 2 or 3 outside clients. I believe he represented the Colorado State Patrol, as well as the Colorado Mortgage Lenders Association, which is where I got to know him. So our condolences to the Goulding family. And again, we'll have a more formal time, hopefully, with family guests here in the chamber before we're done. But just want to let you know that, and Mr. President, thank you again for the time.
Senator Kolker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you. It was April 13th, 1999. I took a group of high school students to the state legislature in Iowa, and it was marked in the Legislative Journal at that time. And today I have a former student of mine visiting, and it's just amazing how much time flies and how life changes, but yet we hear in the legislature, we make differences every day in our current lives, and it's a good reminder that for me, having my former student here, Angela McCabe, who I knew as Angela McCabe at that time, reminds me that I'm living the life that I used to teach about. So it's important work that we do, and I think it's a good reminder for all of us that how we make impacts every day. So that's all. Thank you. No.
Further announcements. Majority Leader Moreno. Senator Hansen.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. Just quickly, members, for Senate Appropriations announcement for the members. We will be gaveling it at 8:30 tomorrow. We've got 11 bills under consideration. You can see them printed on your calendars. Please keep in mind we are looking at least 2 approps meetings per week at this point. May need to add special meetings to help manage our bill flow and make sure we don't get too stacked up. But everyone, please prepare tomorrow morning, LSBB, 8:30 for Senate Appropriations.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate recess until 3 p.m. today. Colleagues, you do not need to return. We're just reading bills across the desk.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will recess until 3 p.m. today.